what I'd like to have you do is introduce yourself a little bit about where you went to school,
Sure.
where you're living, and then what you're doing now. And then I'll ask the questions and we'll fill in the gaps after that.
That sounds great.
Take it away whenever you're ready.
Hey, my name's Elizabeth Perry. Go by Liz or Elizabeth, both are fine. I'm the owner of Speech Therapy and Accent Group, which is a private practice for speech therapy. We're just branching into occupational therapy as well. We're an in home practice and we're located in the San Francisco Bay Area. We're fairly small, but we're growing and there's always new areas to explore into. So I did my undergraduate at University of California, Davis. They don't have a program for speech therapy there. I had no clue what I wanted to go into. Once I realized I wanted to go into speech therapy, I took as many prerequisite courses as I could, but I had to make all of those up in graduate school once I got there. And that's me.
So, what did you do getting out of SLP school? What was like your first job? Talk to us a little bit about that. What was that like?
I was 8 months pregnant with my daughter when I was graduating or in the process of graduating from graduate school. And I got a frantic call from a local school district. And they said, we don't have a speech therapist on board. We had a speech therapist, but she hasn't shown up to work in about 2 months. So we're 2 months backlogged on services for these kids. Could you drive out to this school and see all these kids? And I said, I don't have my degree yet. I still have a couple weeks. And they said, that's totally fine. Just get out here. We need to be meeting minutes and we'll make sure that there's appropriate supervision for you until you graduate in a couple of weeks. And I said, I'm also about ready to have a baby. And they said, that's also fine. Just come on out. So I was trying to balance 3 days out in this little rural cowtown district and then 2 days on campus, still trying to fulfill all of my teaching requirements on campus while I was about ready to give birth. And I ended up loving working at that school. And I stayed there until several days after my due date. And and then when I had my daughter, I just called in and said, I won't be in for a couple weeks. And they said, that's fine. Take as long as you need, but come in whenever you want. You just give us a call. You're coming in today. And then you can come back in. I worked there till the end of the school year, but it was a really positive experience. That was out in Utah. And then at the end of the school year, we moved to California and I started working at a school district in California. And it was completely different. I'm not going to say that school districts are better in one state or another because I have also met really phenomenal teams out here in California. It was a very different experience. It wasn't exactly what I was expecting. And there are ups and downs to working in any environment, schools included.
Hmm.
It just wasn't what I was expecting. So I transitioned after the following school year from an elementary school into a private practice about an hour away from my home. And I really enjoyed that experience. It was really positive. I loved the people that I worked with. I loved being in a private clinic kind of setting. And I learned a lot about working in a private practice and what it means to be a private practice clinician as opposed to working in a school because they're fairly different.
Hmm.
Learned about payer sources and insurance, a little bit how that works, and about the kinds of payer sources that are available, not just in California, but nationwide, how various states are set up in terms of what early intervention sources are available and what's available through school districts, through private practices. There's just an interesting lay of the land, and it changes slightly depending on what state you're in, but for the most part, there are a lot of similarities.
Okay, sounds good. If I may, what was the transition from going from Utah to starting in that elementary, I think, setting that you did in California? What caused that shift and that move?
I think now looking back on it, it wasn't necessarily just changing from Utah to California, although I did find that California is a little bit more litigious in general than Utah. So there were a lot more families out here who were a lot more interested in their rights as parents, which every parent should be. They should be aware of their rights and they should be advocating for themselves and for their children. And that's great. But there was a much, much greater focus on that here in California. And I wasn't expecting that. So everything you do is being watched
Mm.
by lawyers. And that at first felt very uncomfortable. I also transitioned from an extraordinarily poorly funded rural poor district where 75% of the students were receiving backpacks full of food at the end of the week to take home when I was at this district in Utah versus in California at a very wealthy school where students would come back from summer vacation and talk about all the cruises that they went on over the summer and the number of iPads they had. It was a very different demographic.
For sure.
And so I wasn't expecting quite a drastic shift. And perhaps I should have been expecting something like that, just based on where I was working. But it took me by surprise.
For sure. No doubt. No doubt. The shift from the elementary setting to the private practice, talk to us about that. What was the reasoning behind the shift, and what did you like, what did you not like, and what really made you get into the private practice at that point?
While I met some of the best clinicians I've ever met in the schools, my clinical fellowship supervisor at the elementary school I was at, Denise LaBarba, she just retired this year, but she's one of the best speech therapists I have ever met. And she was so knowledgeable and very kind and direct. She taught me a lot about what I know about speech therapy now. And she was at the elementary school, but I couldn't stand the bureaucracy of it, the piles and piles of paperwork and the numbers of meetings and how you have to watch every single word so carefully because parents and special education staff and lawyers, everyone is looking to see how that can or cannot be used in the court of law. And I did not like that. I wasn't prepared for it as a new clinician. I do a lot of that now and I love it. But at the time, 12, 13 years ago, it just was not what I was looking for. So I decided to give private practice a go. There was a clinician I knew who worked at a private practice about an hour away. And she said, come and interview for a position at our company. So I did. And the caseloads are much smaller. So instead of having a caseload of technically 60 children on individualized education plans, but more like 80 to 100, when I was in Utah, I had a caseload of 120. So I believe they have more stringent caseload caps now than they did 10 years ago. But at the time, it was a lot. And I felt incompetent. Like I couldn't do what I wanted to do with all of the students because they're just rapid fire sessions. You're taking 3 kids into a classroom. You have 20 minutes with them and then you just release them. You don't have time to prep for your sessions. And that felt like a bit of a disservice to me. And you could still get things done. You could still exit kids and make progress. It was just harder to do. When I was in the private practice, however, you had a caseload of max 30 kids, maybe. And so you have time to prepare for your sessions, write up more notes, think about how you are going to best serve your client and their family, and more time to drop in with them. There's also you have your own office or sharing with another clinician. And I just felt like I had a little bit more autonomy and slightly less paperwork. And I didn't have lawyers breathing down my neck. And that was really nice too. So it was just a bit of a different environment.
It sounds like a no-brainer, really, when you're putting them up there, comparing them side by side, which one's going to be a better fit.
Well, a lot of clinicians love working in the schools. I think it's something like 70% of speech therapists are working in a school setting, and they really enjoy it. I was not one of that 70%.
And that's okay. You know, so a question I had for you was, is it pretty common in the school districts in California to have that, like everybody present, lawyers present, really hanging on every word you're saying? The thing, is that kind of a common thing there?
I would say it really depends on the district you're in, but yeah.
Okay.
Yes, things are much more litigious out here. I had never once had to go to IDEA law meetings when I was out in Utah versus when I was in California, and we went to trainings all the time. And I didn't like the emphasis on how to protect the district rather than how can we best serve our kids and also be legal at the same time. I thought, why can't we all hold hands here together where we are serving the children that we need to be seeing and also trying to do everything in a more harmonious way. And I think that special education directors and special education administrators and personnel are really working hard to bridge that gap and to have more unity within their districts and to be more harmonious with families. And a lot of districts in the area do take a lot of pride in the good relationships that they're cultivating with the families within their special education programs. But it's still going to be hard, and there's still going to be a lot of division, and there's an us versus them mentality that I wish did not exist that does. You have parents who are appropriately advocating for their children and districts who are appropriately advocating for the district, but there's not as much unity as I would like to see. And so I think that's something that everyone is working really hard on. And a lot of special education directors are making good strides toward that. There's just a lot of work to still be done there.
For sure. Absolutely. So we got you to the getting into this first private practice, that you got more autonomy, less caseload, just really seems to be a better fit. What's next after that?
I was there for about 2 years and I got pregnant with my son at the time. And when I went back to work after my son, I just had this amazing feeling of burnout where we were cogs in the system. You go in, you see a full 8 clients back to back, just boom, one right after the other, every half hour or hour. And on your work break, if you're lucky, you might get 20 minutes to eat. And then the rest of the time, you're just trying to prep sessions and write notes. And then you're right back into it. There's an hour-long commute both ways. And the pay was comparable with what I had been making at the schools, except you don't get the summers off. And it was fine as a second income. But if I were the primary breadwinner for the family, it would not have sufficed.
For sure.
So yeah, about 2 years into being there, I ended up getting a divorce and realized I'm going to have to be the primary breadwinner for myself and my 2 young children. And they were really little. They were 1 and 4 at the time.
Man.
And at that point, it was more a matter of what am I going to do that will be financially sustainable for myself and my family, and with regard to my time is also going to be sustainable, because I can't be commuting an hour in and an hour back when I have a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old who I need to be picking up from daycare.
Absolutely. The picture is painted here crystal clear. Yeah. Okay. So what was your next move? Like, you know what's got to happen. What did you end up doing?
I realized that private practice, going into my own private practice, I ran the numbers and saw how many clients I would need to be seeing in order to make what I was currently making, and saw the potential for building. And if that felt really scary, because one, I'm out on my own trying to get out of a marriage that did not work, and not really having an income and jumping into something, trying to build up a business from scratch with no business background whatsoever seemed, in some ways, I thought, this is really dumb. It's not a smart decision. I don't know what I'm doing. But also, it seemed in the long term like it would be overall more feasible, because the earning potential, staying where I was at, or even transferring laterally to a different private practice or to a different school district, I was just not going to make enough to ever provide for my children the way that I wanted to provide for them.
I have to ask, because I think you have a really valuable experience here. What helped you get through this? I can't imagine what that's like, going through this time of your life that you were going through. What would you say really helped you get through this to be able to start this practice, this creating your own private practice?
There were a couple of things. The first one was that I met with a colleague of mine, Jennifer Oppenheimer. Her husband is now my business coach, but she's a wonderful speech therapist. She's the speech therapist who initially brought me into the private practice where I was working an hour away from home. And I said, listen, I like where I'm at this company, but also I think that I could go out and do it on my own. And she and I talked for a couple of hours, and she said, yeah, you can do it. Don't worry about it. I think that if you are driven and motivated, that this is something that you can do. It's not rocket science, but there are so many supports built up to help you. You don't have to know everything. You don't have to have the answers, but there's free business coaching available loosely for women through various nonprofit organizations. There are local groups like Business Networking International that you can join. There are books that you can read on entrepreneurship and business ownership. ASHA, our accrediting organization for speech therapists, has some resources. And also, if you're organized and dedicated and hardworking, you can definitely accomplish this.
I love that.
Yeah. And I don't know, there was something inside of me that wanted to be able to prove to myself that I could do something good and worthwhile occupationally. I was not just getting a divorce, I was also leaving a cult at the time. And coming out of that organization where I had been told that my only purpose in life was to be a stay-at-home mom, which is great. That's a very noble aspiration, but I wanted to do something different. So this was also proving to myself that I was capable of doing that. And that kind of drove me to keep pushing even when it felt a little bit too hard and overwhelming.
Absolutely, for sure. Another resource I'll add is SCORE, SCORE.
Yes, that was the organization I was alluding to.
Yeah, retired executives. So they're across the United States. Anybody can go onto their website and sign up and get a mentor. They're very helpful. A follow-up question I had for you was, but practicing at the private practice clinic that your friend initially talked to you about and you took the job, do you feel that was really important, a pivotal point? Did the skill set that you gained there from working in that clinic really help you in opening up your own private practice?
The skill set was helpful, but it wasn't helpful in so much as owning your own private practice, because we were really shielded from the administrative side of things. They had people whose job it was to come in and to do the scheduling and to do the billing and to do the HR. And that's not something that they teach the clinicians, and they don't need to, and they shouldn't. It's great that they have a smart distribution of responsibility.
For sure. Okay. So talk to us about this journey. What are some of these initial steps that you took on and took to create your own private SLP practice?
Just to go back really quickly to your previous point, while you don't gain the skill set necessarily to start a private practice from working in a private practice, you get to know the owners if it's a small enough company, and that can be just good enough training really to jump into something, because you see that they're just regular people just like you, who may or may not have had any business training and background, and that they are people who are capable of making mistakes and who have made mistakes and who's just gotten up again after they've been knocked down by their mistakes. So that's the adequate training I think you really need in order to start a business, to have some people who are also business owners who you can talk to or look up to and to support. And that's important to any step of the journey. But in terms of actually starting the business, I went on to rocketlawyer.com and incorporated at the time as a limited liability company because I didn't know any better. We're now an S corporation, but I chose a name and got a logo and just a website, hung out my sign and said, hey, here we are. We're on Yelp. We're online. If you want private pay services. And people were calling in and asking questions, and I didn't know what they meant. Like they said, do you offer receipts? And I'm thinking, receipts? What are those? Like really no concept of how private practice works. Uh-huh. This was back in 2016.
Okay.
So we've come a long way since then. But it was a startling experience. And we got a couple of phone calls over the first month or two. It wasn't a whole lot. And I was looking at some additional payer sources at the time. Regional Center is an early intervention, state-funded therapy helping organization throughout the state of California, which does a lot of, it offers in-home therapy at no cost to families, and you can become a vendor with them. And they're very straightforward in terms of gaining clients and billing. And so I thought they might be a good payer source to start out with. So I started going through the process. It was a 6-month process of becoming vendorized with Regional Center. And then once that happened, I went immediately overnight to full-time because they had so many clients in my area who needed to be seen in home.
I love that. Perfect. So did you, when you were starting all this and you created the LLC and you started the business and put it out on Yelp, did you actually have a brick and mortar like location as well?
No, we've never had a brick and mortar location ever. And that's something that I would consider potentially for the future. But I love the business model that we have. We go in home and we become part of people's families. And that was never something that I was able to do when I worked in the schools or at a private practice. When I had my own office in a brick and mortar, sometimes parents were in the sessions, sometimes they weren't. It felt like a stagnant place where people would just come in, do speech therapy, and then they leave. They go home, and I have no clue what's happening at home. But when you walk into someone's home, there's a level of authenticity and vulnerability that's there that I really love. And we're able to make progress and to generalize skills in a way that I could not do when I was in a different setting. So I know that home health really scares a lot of clinicians. The idea of having to drive to someone's home is not as maybe profitable as lining up all of your clients via a, I don't know, teletherapy, for instance. But there's a way of connecting with families that I get within the home that I never got in any other kind of setting. And I love it.
And I think it's fair to say that your value can shine even more in those settings in the home because you're seeing things that you wouldn't probably otherwise see or notice at the brick and mortar.
Oh, absolutely. There are particular scripts and stims and behaviors and food preferences, everything coming out at home that you would never ever see in a different environment. And I found when I was working at a private practice and I had my own office, I was asking families a lot of questions about home because I really wanted to support their skill set that they exhibited in the place where they spend the most time, which is at home with their families.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get to step into someone's home, that whole middleman piece is completely eliminated. You're already there. You get to see preferred activities, favorite toys. You get to see how a lot of these children, if say they're nonverbal, how are they communicating with you to ask for things like a snack? Or how are they playing with their toys that they have at home? And you can also use the tools, the toys, the manipulatives that they already have within their home, which helps with overall generalization of skills as well. Because that's what
Absolutely.
they're using during the week too. They're not your own isolated toys. So I like to bring in a couple of my own things, but then it's great to use what they already have because that's what they're going to be using during the week too.
For sure. Yeah, I completely agree. The services that you provide, are they a generic and they cover a bunch of different things, or are they more specialized and you see only certain types of patients, if you will?
I like to see everything across the board. There are some areas that I don't want to touch. I don't feel confident in my abilities in areas like swallowing, for instance. So that's an area of speech that I won't go into, but I love everything else. I love getting to know people and helping the individual person using the skill set that I have. And if I don't know something, if I'm not as familiar with a particular genetic condition or someone comes in with multiple sclerosis, how am I going to deal with that? So there are ways to learn and to become a specialist in these areas. When you meet a clinician, or not a clinician, excuse me, when you meet a family, and if they're presenting you with something that you haven't seen as often than before or worked with extensively, you can go and take continuing education courses on that. You can read up in textbooks. You can go and talk to clinicians who do have extensive experience in these areas. I had a couple of clients, for example, who called in last year and they all had functional speech disorders. I had never heard of that. Maybe I had heard of it very loosely in graduate school, but they all were desperate for help and no one was willing to help them because no one wanted to touch psychogenic functional speech difficulty.
Uh-huh.
So I asked I was very open and I said, I've never done anything like this before, but I'm open to learning. And all of the families said, great, that's totally fine. It was like 3 families back to back who all children who were dealing with this. And so I went and talked with a couple of speech therapists over at the Mayo Clinic who specialize in this, had phone calls and Zoom meetings, and they gave me a lot of tips and tools, and then went and took some continuing education in this, read up a couple of articles, and then went to some of these families and said, I've never done this before, but let's give it a try. And it worked great. And now I can confidently say, yep, I can see a family member, or if you have a functional speech disorder, let's talk about it. But it's okay to go into an area that you haven't had extensive experience before, if you're open with the family that you're working with and letting them know, I've never done this before, but I'm willing to learn.
Absolutely. I love that tip, Liz. It's perfect. It's you're being upfront right away with your clients and who you're working with and helping establish that rapport and that trust. And if they're open to it, yeah, it's totally an opportunity to help. You help them and then they help you too, right? Because you're learning.
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
yeah, let's talk about like you're starting out this business and you got a payer source coming in. What's next for you? Are you like hiring? Are you hiring staff? Are you hiring accountants? What's going on? What's the growth here?
I realized pretty quickly within the first year or so that I needed to have some kind of admin to help. So I hired an administrative assistant, and she was doing about 10 to 15 hours a week. And she's still on with us. This is about 6 years ago. She's still on with us. She's doing about 20 hours a month of work
Hmm.
now. And she's our regional center liaison, our coordinator. She does our graphics. It's just a fabulous kind of support. And she was the first person on. Then I took on a speech therapist just to see a couple of kiddos who I couldn't get to. And she's still with us as well. So she just sees a small handful of clients. And then after that, I realized I really needed a CPA. I needed a small business lawyer who could answer a lot of questions for me. I needed someone who could handle insurance. And those are the three big ones that you really do need. You have to have, they're like legs of a stool almost. You have to have your insurance person who you can talk to and trust. You have to have a really phenomenal CPA who has extensive experience in small business. And you have to have the small business lawyer who you can also trust and talk to. So those three things got me really solidly set up. Ended up transitioning my company from the LLC to the S Corp, and then hired a billing specialist because the billing side was taking way too much time. And I was unfamiliar with a lot of various systems that I could be using to help systematize and automate, make things go a lot smoother. Stuff like reminders for sessions getting texted out to families, and being billing being done automatically, and receipts and super bills being sent out automatically. It was just overwhelming. So I hired someone who now does that for me, and she is out of state and works about 20 hours a week or so. And that's been phenomenal. But I've just been adding clinicians onto the business.
Uh-huh.
And that's, yeah, it's been really rewarding. We've opened up with OT now. It's just been slowly growing and growing.
That's perfect. I love all that. You definitely have gotten to a point where you've got a lot of experience under your belt with establishing a SLP and an overall therapeutic business, and then also what I'd like to say, scaling it, growing it. Because what'll happen is, as you found out, is one person can't do all this stuff, and frankly, usually what's recommended is if you're not good at it, it's probably best just to hire it out and have somebody that's good to do it, because it'll save time and there's like a lot of pros that go along with that. So a question that I have for you would be, in order to scale this and grow, to have some of these specialties paid for and be part of the business and serve the business, did you have to also increase your patient caseload to be able to allow funding for these kinds of things?
Absolutely. So I did have to increase it a bit, but more so than that, increasing rates. I was really resistant at first to increasing rates, and then realized this is just a necessary part of the business where you're providing a high quality level of care with a lower caseload. And if you really want to maintain your lower caseload, but be able to afford the support on the side that you need to run the business, you need to be increasing your rates. And you want to make sure that you're choosing the right clientele who can do that comfortably. And I have some sliding scale, so we get to support a wide variety of clientele.
That's awesome. That's very cool. I love all that. What was that like going through that? Was there like a resource or colleague or something, or did you do some A/B testing with figuring out what should I price this at? We know we should increase it, but like how high, where should we go?
Started back in 2016, well below the industry standard for hourly rates just because I felt so uncomfortable with it. And I think a lot of new business owners do feel uncomfortable setting rates and asking for people to pay. And then every year or so, just raised rates to try to bring it up to the industry standard. And then it started increasing over the industry standard. And no one bats an eye. We are well over the industry standard for what we charge, but no one seems to care. And part of that is our clientele. We have a lot of people coming in who millionaires, billionaires, this is all just a drop in the bucket for them. But also they help to make it affordable for the people who can't pay. If I have a client coming in and they really need the help and no one else is willing to work with them, but they can't afford it, then great. I'm charging someone on one end who can't afford it and then working pro bono with this client who can't. It works out well.
Everybody wins. I love that.
Yeah.
Yes. Excellent. I'm really glad you shared that, because that's what I've heard too in this business space is there's a lot of hesitation with an owner wanting to increase their rates. And what's often encouraged is each new client, each new somebody that comes in, just increase a little bit and keep going over time, increase a little bit and see if you get to a point where it's like, they're like, no, they won't pay for it. And that exactly what you said is often what happens is the owners are surprised because it's nobody's saying no. They're willing to pay for it. And it's because the value that you are providing is worth it to them for the price, because that's really what you're experimenting with. And I love that. I think that's great. You guys did it and you're able to grow and scale, and it's awesome.
We charge now more than 3 times what we charged when we first started. Right. And it's a lot. But also, if you think about the cost of your drive time, getting into people's homes and being available for them in extended hours, and also being a support for them when they need a shoulder to cry on. They give us a call. We've been the first person that a lot of families have called when their child is diagnosed with autism and they don't know what to do and they need resources. They just need someone to listen. And that's an invaluable resource for a lot of families. And we have to make the business financially sustainable so that we can keep running it. And also so that I can put food on the table for my kids. I now have a family of 7. My husband is going to medical school soon. And so he's a full-time student. He also has some jobs he's doing on the side, but all of that money is going into paying for school. And so I'm the primary breadwinner for us and our 5 young children. And so I need to have a business with rates that are sustainable so that I can keep serving more families. And if I was charging the industry rate or below, there's no way that I could pay the mortgage and put food on the table. And then also, just as importantly, see clients and continue to make an impact in that arena, because we wouldn't be able to keep our doors open. So it's hard to raise rates. And also the services that you offer are totally worth it because you're offering something that is the best in your industry, as is often the case for a lot of us who are running out to start a business. And you are worth the rate that you decide to set, even if it is double what you're currently making. You just double your rate and they'll pay it because they want the best service and you are making an impact.
Totally agree. Yes. I think this is awesome. I love talking to you. You're obviously very successful and have come a long ways.
I'm still learning.
For sure. It's kind of part of the process, right?
Yeah. There are a lot of things that I don't know and that I recognize I am not good at. I'm just not. So bringing people into the team who are experts in those areas has been a complete game changer. Having our CPA on board, who also runs our payroll, who also brought in a bookkeeper who does things on the side, having a billing specialist who understands how to run our EMR, is all of it is so fabulous. And then having an HR specialist just to help with some of the managing and the paperwork affiliated with that. These are all areas I have no background in. And I recognize that I could try to learn that skill, or I can just bring someone in who's already acquired that skill and who's infinitely better at it than I probably ever will be. Delegating has been a life changer.
For sure. And yeah, I think it's vital, as you've proven. If you're going to grow a business and you're not going to do everything, you have to hire out and delegate. Otherwise, you're going to bottleneck your time because you won't have enough time to do everything, you know?
Absolutely. Even on a non-professional level, just from a personal level as a business owner, I want to do and be everything. I want to be 100% present supermom who is here and available with the kids and makes every single meal and does 100% of the cleaning and the yard work and running the business and working a full-time job and being primary breadwinner. And you just can't do everything. So I read Rachel Rogers' book, How We Should All Be Millionaires. And in it, she says the only thing that you can buy that's going to help promote your happiness is buying your time. And I took that to heart and I immediately made a post on Facebook saying, hey, is anyone looking for just a couple of extra bucks on the side? I could really use some help at home because I was noticing that there was a lot of work that I was not able to get to, that my husband was not able to get to with our busy schedules, that would enable us to free up our time so that we could spend more time with our children. Like
Absolutely.
making meals, cleaning, folding laundry. We have 2 loads of laundry a day because we have 5 kids. So there's just a lot there. And I hired a friend who now comes in about 5 hours a week or so. And she's a personal assistant. She does so much work around the house and it's affordable. It's great for her. It's helping out her bottom line. It's helping us out. And we can put that time directly back into our children. So there's just a lot of goodness there.
I love that. Thanks for sharing. That's come up before in a prior episode where I talk with another young gal that's aspiring entrepreneur, business owner, and she talks about really the mind shift, which is a lot of what we're talking about is this getting your time back and how do you want to structure your life. And something that came up too was mom guilt and feeling that you as a mom, and I don't know what this is. I'm using what she said in our prior episode, the pressures of maybe society or family, whatever, that as a mom, you're supposed to do A, B, and C. And the reality is if you want to create your own business and have time that you really get to spend quality time with your kids and those that you love and care about, it is okay to hire things out to get done so you can do that. Like, it's okay. And I'm glad you're on here talking about it because I really want to break that like double standard and all that stuff. Like we don't need all that. It's okay. You can live the lifestyle that you want and you can hire out to cook, clean, whatever. Like, it doesn't make you any less of a mom.
Absolutely. That's a really tough one, societally speaking, even among other business owners. I went to this business networking international meeting about 5 years ago, and I was sitting next to this woman, and she asked what I did, and I told her. And she said, oh, that's great, but just wait till you have kids. And I already had kids at home, but I was in shock. Oh man, she's another woman and she's telling me that we can't simultaneously hold motherhood and entrepreneurship, but men can walk in and hold fatherhood and entrepreneurship. So why then can't I?
I completely agree. Yeah.
That was hard.
I like the resource that you provided with the How We Should All Be Millionaires. Follow-up question I had for you is there a resource out there that helped you find all of these delegated professionals to do what you're needing to do, like the administrative assistant, the CPA, the lawyer, the person that's helping you at your house? Is there a website that's been really beneficial, or like what's helped you most find all the right people to fill these spots for you?
It has been trial and error over the last 7 years. So there probably are great resources out there, and I'm just not aware of them. But it was really, I went through another CPA before I got to this one. And that was after I had interviewed 5 CPAs.
Oh.
And I interviewed 5. I went with one. It was a complete disaster, stuck with them for a year, but everything was a mess. And then I found my new CPA, my current CPA, and I've been with him for about 5 years now or so, but he spent 2 years trying to help me clean up the messes that were made previously. And it was really important to find the right team. I found my insurance agent, who is just absolutely phenomenal, through a previous business coach of mine who introduced me to her. And she's been a phenomenal resource and ally. And then my small business lawyer I found on Yelp, of all places. Yelp is a great
Nice.
tool. My business coach now, I found through another colleague of mine who runs a private practice about an hour and a half away. It's a similar model she does in home. And I was asking her if she knew of any business coaches who specialized in or had extensive experience working with speech therapy businesses in particular. And she said, "Oh, don't you remember Robert?" And then I went, "Oh my goodness, you're right." And so she directed me to him. But having other business owners in a similar tangentially related field is important because they have resources and they can help you. And now with all sorts of business owners in the area who run other kinds of practices, physical therapy, occupational therapy, other speech therapy practices with a different kind of model, like mostly adults, or we all refer professionals back and forth to each other.
Hmm.
And then they're already vetted for you, which is really nice.
For sure. That's great. It's like using your network to see where to get these good professionals and services that you're needing. Yes.
The network is everything. Reaching out to potential power partners, people who might be referral sources for you, or people who you might refer to and they may not refer to you. You want to build your network. It's so important because every business meeting one-to-one that you set up with another business owner, whether it's in person or over Zoom, you never know where it's going to lead you and what opportunities might arise from it. Things that are going to benefit them, things that are going to benefit you. And then you have this wide network of resources at your disposal, not just for you and your business, but also for your clients. It's good to know what's available in your area. So if they need literally anything, you already have someone who's on speed dial who you can send them to directly. And that's a huge of a business as well, to know when someone needs a particular resource, exactly who to send them to so they can be seen quickly. And so they're happy with the quality of the services that they're receiving.
Absolutely. Completely agree 100%. With the last, we got about 10 minutes
Sure.
here. With the last time that we have, I want to take this time we talked a little bit about this on the discovery call, to talk about other avenue streams that you're establishing. And I want to hear more about that and talk about as much as you're comfortable sharing. And I just
Yeah.
think it's really exciting. So yeah, go for it.
It's wonderful doing in home and making impact in the area where we do the direct speech, but there are also wider areas of impact that I've been wanting to look into for a while. Like, for instance, we get a lot of families calling in whose children have just been diagnosed with autism, and they say, "We don't even know where to go. There's no handbook for this." But wouldn't it be great if there was a handbook? Or there are whole areas of the world where services are not available to families, where speech therapy and occupational therapy don't even exist. So how are we going to go and try to make impact domestically, internationally? There's so many different areas to go into, and we have to pick and choose, but we have delved into a couple of different areas outside of direct in-home speech therapy. One area that we've gotten into over the past couple of years has been outreach in China. And we've partnered, a colleague of mine who brought applied behavior analysis into China about 20 years ago, very successfully reached out and said, "I would like to bring speech therapy into China. There's a billion people there, more than a billion people, and there are very limited resources available, not a lot of evidence-based practice. And so how can we be culturally sensitive and also really try to make an impact and help?" So we piloted a few programs last year and the year before, where we taught classes to various students, professionals, parents at various universities throughout the country, starting in Beijing and then expanding from there. And then most recently, we just found out that a series of guidelines that we wrote for best practices for speech therapy for children with autism ages 0 to 6 was just accepted by the China Association of Rehabilitation for People with Disabilities, which is the offshoot of the government where they help and standardize and monitor a lot of the kinds of therapies that are going on within the country. So those will hopefully, after a few more edits and meetings and approvals from the board, will be ready for distribution in 2024. And then we'll see where we go from there. But that was a huge
Congratulations. I've never heard of anybody doing that. And I'm just super excited for you. I think that's very cool.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been really exciting.
For sure. We talked a little bit about this on the Discovery Call. How did this start? How did all this kind of like this journey start with this opportunity here?
I met this colleague a couple of years ago. We were working together on some various projects, and then he started asking me a little bit more about just speech therapy practices for the children who've been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, best practices, evaluations and assessment, therapeutic interventions. And I was curious why we were meeting about this until he disclosed a couple of months later. I've been wanting to learn more about this because I want to bring speech therapy into China. So he and his wife are these incredible powerhouses in the country who've done a phenomenal job bringing resources in and training. And they translated, he in particular translated the assessment VMAP into Mandarin from English and published the first and one of the only, if not the only, textbook on behavior for the country. And so he already had a lot of inroads and colleagues and associations with various universities and the government, and said, let's use those resources that we have at our disposal to bring in speech therapy and see what we can do there. And it was just such a humbling and wonderful experience to partner with him and see really what's going on from day to day for a lot of these families and how they really literally have no resources. There's nothing. And the resources that are available, no one has had training or coursework. There are almost no accredited organizations like that train in how to do therapy. So they're doing the best job that they can. They're doing a great job. And also they're guessing. And it's awesome to be able to go in and provide some training so that people have more tools that they can use if and when they want to do more evidence-based practice.
Absolutely. I'm really excited for you, Liz. I think this is so cool. It was right person, right time that you connected
Yes.
with, and it
Yes.
really all came together, and you're on this wave of new venture that I've never heard us doing before. So I'm just really excited for you, and I wish you so much success, and I hope it turns to be a success story and standard that just grows and you reach more people and more people come to you to learn more. And I think it's awesome.
That's what we want, right? We're aiming to help and to make impact. And I love being on the ground and working one-on-one with families, and also simultaneously trying to advocate for larger groups to make more widespread change. So it's great to hold both of those simultaneously. But the networking piece has really been the big thing. I networked a couple of years ago and got to meet a wonderful pediatrician who works in the concierge industry. And she introduced me to a lot of the families that she worked with. And these are all billionaires who run the world. And when you have an opportunity to go in and work with these families who have started the biggest tech companies in the world, and there's so much opportunity to make wide sweeping change, because when they learn about best practice for their children, they have the money and the resources to start nonprofits, to get involved in new ways. There's just so much opportunity for change that's available there when you're working with people who have the ability to make more wide sweeping change as well. So networking.
For sure.
So important.
You just made me think of another follow-up question. How I know there's different career avenues, and for example, you can be a travel therapist, or you can stay in one place for a long time, and there's a bunch of different options. So what I'm thinking is, like, how long would you say did it take for some of these networking connections to actually get established from starting I don't even know, you might even look when you first started working for the private practice, maybe not even you're starting your own practice, but can you give us kind of a scope or an idea of like how long it's taken some of these connections to happen for you and your business?
For me, it has taken quite a few years. I know that there are ways to fast track and accelerate that if you are mindful and intentional and you Know what you're doing. I have not known what I've been doing. It's taken years, but every connection that you cultivate, you never know how that's going to play out in the end. And it could be now, it could be a month from now, it could be 5 or 10 years from now, but you never know. Learning to looking for opportunities to reach out to others and to help and to get to know other professionals in the field could benefit you 5, 10 years down the road.
For sure. You just never know when that opportunity will come up, now or later. So
Right.
for sure. Those positive, healthy relationships. That's something we've talked about on the show before too. Liz, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show and share a little about your journey and your story. It's been great, and I wish you great success. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. It's been a pleasure.